Welcome to our defense briefing show. Today, we're diving into the intense world of geopolitics. First up, Russian President Vladimir Putin has made it clear to US President Donald Trump that he's sticking to his guns on Ukraine. No territorial retreats, but still open to negotiations. Despite international support for Ukraine, Putin's firm stance keeps the conflict heated. Next, the Quad countries, the US, France, Japan, Australia, and India, are showing unity in countering China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. However, internal disagreements and shifting trade policies are testing their solidarity. Meanwhile, global tensions are rising with Israel's military strikes intensifying in Gaza, even as diplomatic efforts for a ceasefire are underway. Finally, in other news, the Gaza conflict has taken a deadly turn with Israeli strikes killing civilians, and the US faces trade uncertainties that could impact mortgage rates. Plus, a historic bridge reopens in Scotland, and a retired ferry remains stranded, sparking discussions about future transportation plans. Stay tuned for all these stories and more. Please continue to watch for the full details. The Sydney Morning Herald reports that Russian President Vladimir Putin has taken a firm stance in his recent phone call with US President Donald Trump, emphasizing his desire to address the root causes of the Ukraine conflict without retreating from his objectives. Putin's message, delivered in nearly an hour of private conversation, underscores Russia's unwillingness to compromise on territorial claims and its resistance to NATO expansion, even as Ukraine faces relentless missile and drone attacks. Meanwhile, European leaders, including EU President Ursula von der Leyen and Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, reaffirmed their support for Ukraine, pledging military aid and financial backing, and highlighting the importance of Ukraine's integration into the EU, despite Russia's vehement opposition. Ukrainian President Zelensky, seeking broader international support, expressed readiness for peace negotiations that include Putin directly, emphasizing Ukraine's commitment to ceasefire efforts amid ongoing Russian assaults and the tragic loss of Russian military officials like Major General Mikhail Gudkov. Foreign policy details the recent reconvening of the Quad in Washington, a strategic alliance originally formed in 2004 and revitalized during Trump's presidency to counter China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. The meeting, attended by Japan, Australia, and India, resulted in the creation of the Quad Critical Minerals Initiative aimed at diversifying supply chains dominated by China. However, tensions loom over the unity of the group as member countries grapple with Trump's unpredictable trade policies and ongoing tariff disputes, which threaten to weaken the alliance. India's negotiations for trade agreements, Australia's frustrations over tariffs, and Japan's postponement of defense dialogues highlight the fragility of the coalition. Meanwhile, China's muted response to the Quad's renewed activity suggests internal doubts about the alliance's strength, especially amid internal disagreements within the US and the shifting priorities of Trump's administration, casting uncertainty on future cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation reports that Israel has intensified its military campaign in Gaza, killing 69 people in a series of strikes that targeted Hamas positions, but also resulted in civilian casualties, including children and aid workers. Despite recent US-led efforts to broker a ceasefire, Israel continues its aggressive operations, claiming to follow international law and take precautions to minimize civilian harm. The conflict, ignited by Hamas's October 2023 attack on Israel, has resulted in over 57,000 Palestinian deaths and widespread displacement, with Gaza's population suffering from severe hunger and destruction. While Israeli officials express optimism about reaching a ceasefire and hostage negotiations, recent days have seen an expansion of military operations, with Prime Minister Netanyahu vowing to dismantle Hamas entirely. Mediators from Egypt and Qatar are working to secure international guarantees for a truce, but Israel's continued assaults threaten to prolong the devastating conflict, raising questions about the prospects for peace amid ongoing violence and humanitarian crises. The Globe and Mail vividly captures the ongoing turbulence in the Canadian mortgage market, heavily influenced by the unpredictable trade war with the United States. The recent deadlock sparked when President Trump withdrew from negotiations over Canada's digital services tax has cast a shadow of uncertainty over the economic outlook. The potential for a prolonged trade conflict could compel the Bank of Canada to cut interest rates further, aiming to bolster a struggling economy. Conversely, if a deal is struck, concerns about inflation might prompt the central bank to keep rates steady. As negotiations unfold, the market eagerly awaits clarity on whether a resolution will be reached, which could significantly sway mortgage rates in the coming weeks. BBC reports a story of resilience and community spirit as the historic bridge in Kirkcaldy, Scotland, reopens after more than 100 days of closure. The bridge's sudden shutdown in March due to safety concerns had split the town in two, forcing residents and businesses to adapt creatively. Local entrepreneurs like Carly Vaughan, who launched the Little Art Den and Galovidia Books, which introduced a doorstep delivery service, exemplified the town's ingenuity during the crisis. The reopening, though still constrained by a 20 miles per hour speed limit and one-way traffic with timed lights, has rekindled a sense of unity and hope. Residents like Mandy Douglas and Nick Morris express relief and optimism, emphasizing that the restored connectivity is vital for the town's social fabric and economic vitality, even as discussions about building a permanent bridge continue. The Sydney Morning Herald recounts the uncertain fate of the Coleroy, one of the iconic freshwater-class ferries that has been docked at Kakadu Island for nearly 2 years since its retirement. The vessel's future remains unresolved amid challenges in finding a new owner or community group capable of operating it profitably. Transport authorities highlight the high costs and logistical hurdles, with experts like Graham Taylor urging the government to retain the ferry, citing its excellent condition and suitability for future service needs. The vessel's prolonged idling underscores broader concerns about the aging fleet and the lack of transparency regarding replacement timelines. As the government plans a fleet overhaul, the Coleroy's fate symbolizes the tension between economic practicality and preserving a piece of Sydney's maritime heritage, with calls growing for decisive action rather than continued procrastination. The BBC reports on Austria's decision to rename 2 streets in Braunau and in Shenzhen, that of Hitler's birthplace, to distance itself from Nazi associations. Once named after Nazi supporters, Joseph Ritter and Franz Riesel will now honor Austrian resistance heroes Maria Stromberger and Leah Ojak, reflecting a symbolic move towards acknowledging Austria's complicity in World War II and its atrocities, including the Holocaust that claimed over 6 million Jewish lives. This change follows a report deeming the original street names unconstitutional, illustrating Austria's ongoing efforts to confront its past and promote remembrance of those who opposed Nazi ideology, despite existing streets still bearing Nazi-linked names. Yahoo US details how judges are continuing to block Trump policies despite the Supreme Court's recent ruling that curbed the use of nationwide injunctions in the aftermath. Judges like Randolph Moss and John Bates have employed alternative legal strategies such as class actions and the Administrative Procedure Act to challenge and overturn Trump-era policies, including asylum bans and restrictions on gender-related content. These judicial actions demonstrate that while the Supreme Court's decision was significant, it has not halted judicial resistance. Instead, it has prompted legal challengers to adapt their tactics, with ongoing cases examining whether broader injunctions can still be issued through different legal avenues, prolonging the legal battles against the Trump administration's policies. The Associated Press recounts the life of Dr. Joseph Giordano, The surgeon who played a pivotal role in saving President Ronald Reagan after his 1981 assassination attempt. Giordano's expertise and swift action during the emergency, performing life-saving procedures under intense pressure, helped stabilize Reagan and retrieve the bullet perilously close to his heart. His career at George Washington University transformed the hospital's trauma center into one of the nation's best, and his humanitarian efforts extended to international medical missions. Known for his quick wit and compassion, Giordano famously reassured Reagan with the words, "Today, Mr. President, we are all Republicans," despite his own liberal beliefs, exemplifying his dedication to saving lives and serving others. The South China Morning Post reports that during a high-stakes meeting with EU's Kaja Kallas, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi conveyed a stark message. China cannot afford Russia's defeat in Ukraine, fearing that a loss would cause the US to shift its focus entirely onto Beijing. This candid remark appears to contradict China's public stance of non-involvement, revealing Beijing's strategic calculus that prolonging the conflict might serve its interests as long as the US remains preoccupied in Ukraine. Wang dismissed accusations of material support to Russia, asserting that if China were aiding Moscow materially, the war would have ended sooner. The discussion, lasting 4 hours, was tense yet respectful, with Wang delivering what some saw as a lesson in realpolitik, emphasizing the U.S.'s potential eastward shift and hinting that China's engagement in the Ukraine conflict might be strategic rather than supportive. The meeting also touched on trade disputes, with Wang threatening retaliation over EU sanctions on Chinese banks and dismissing EU concerns about China's rare earth exports, which are crucial for European manufacturing. Despite these tensions, Wang maintained that China and the EU share broad common interests, especially on climate issues, and expressed hope for cooperation, although the overall tone indicated frustration and a lack of reassurance on key issues. The encounter, marked by its bluntness and underlying strategic tensions, cast a shadow over upcoming China-EU summits, with insiders concerned about the prospects for concrete agreements amid ongoing disputes over trade, technology, and geopolitics. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopsis, thoughtfully curated by the 6DO team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6DO Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6DO team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6DO Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6DO Brief via email.